And now, the real spoiler warning. From this point on, expect spoilers for every single thing in the story. Although I'll be discussing chapter by chapter, I will be alluding to things from many chapters down the road, so if you don't want to be spoiled on Xenoblade 3's story, please turn back now. I won't be covering every individual thought I have on the story, because that would make this video go on for about 5 hours, so instead I've narrowed it down to a few main points I wanted to bring up, which just so happened to work out to be about 1 point per chapter. Chapter 1.
It's not over yet!
G'day mates, I'm Vandom, and I'm back to pretty much save the world by turning these kids into fair dinkum Ouroboros. So, this is something I've been wanting to talk about on the channel for a very long time. As somebody who's actually from Australia, Vandom from Xenoblade 2 has always been a personal meme of mine. His accent is possibly the most cartoonishly exaggerated Australian stereotype imaginable, but I still love him because Australian accents are rare in video games, and he's just such an awesome character that I can't possibly hate it. So I was very glad when not only did a lookalike of him with the exact same accent come back in this game, but that he pretty much, as I said, kickstarts the entire plot and is the reason the world is saved in the end. Score 1 for the power of Australia! Chapter 2.
It's the big bad boss. Boom! Here I come!
As this is our real introduction to Councils and Mobius, I thought I'd give my overall thoughts on them. I think all the consoles in the main story are great. The problem is the ones in the hero quests, who can all be summed up like this. Greetings, worms! It is I, Consul Giantham, not a villain. It's Mobin time! Darn, and I would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for you meddling Ouroboros. I have nothing against purely evil villains. In fact, I think D is an example of one done spectacularly well. The side quest consoles are just so cartoonishly one-dimensional that their existence ruins a lot of the mystique and fear factor that Mobius has in the main story. Gameplay-wise, I like that side quests get to have big boss fights like this. But by overusing Mobius as generic monsters of the week, it does hurt the organization in the main story. I will say that the few side quest consoles that are developed characters are very good, but there's maybe like 2 of them out of all the hero quests. Chapter 2 also introduces us to the concept, both story and gameplay-wise, of liberating colonies by destroying their flame clocks. I liked this, but entirely for personal reasons. Recently, I've become very disillusioned with the slew of "the world itself is corrupt and evil and we must rebel against it" plotlines, because I was fine with it in Persona 5, but since then a lot of them have dived way too hard into ends justify the means territory and made their protagonists really unlikable to me. So I was very pleasantly surprised when, during these scenes, Noah was like, breaking the flame clock could kill everyone, and if it does, I'm prepared to take responsibility. Of course, he lucks out and it doesn't actually hurt anybody, but from that point on, whenever the party destroys a colony's flame clock, it's almost always done consensually, and it really feels like they're trying to let the inhabitants decide their own future, rather than forcing their own ideology on others to replace a previous forced ideology. And in side quests, you get some really nice development on what life is like in these colonies post-liberation. and how not all their problems magically went away, how some of them are struggling to find purpose in their lives with not having to fight anymore, how others still want to continue the war with Agnes, and it always felt satisfying from this point on, discovering a new colony and liberating it. Chapter 3.
He turned into mud pie?
And now is your last spoiler warning, because I'm about to discuss the first major reveal in the game here. I called Chapter 3's plot twist. And I love that. To me, the most satisfying plot twists are the ones that I'm able to guess in advance based on earlier foreshadowing. Though admittedly, this one I got mainly as a joke, because when seeing Yoren in all those flashbacks, I was like, he's gonna pull his syndrome and come back as a villain later, isn't he? And sure enough...
After all, I am your biggest fan.
I like how Chapter 2 lulls you into a false sense of security by having it unmask Mobius be someone you've never seen before, so that when this one is somebody you and the characters know, it hits much harder. Chapter 4.
Spark off!
How dare you defy me, my beloved Shulk Juniors? You should be fighting the real enemy. No, not Agnes. Fiora! She stole Shulk from me, and critical shipping error fanfiction not found. I admit I was a little iffy about this reveal when I saw it, because it's a blatant case of, that character you love from a past game is evil now. Oh wait, psych, they're actually a robot. Just from the trailers, I thought it was pretty obvious they weren't really gonna make Melia and Nia villains, but the way they ended up doing it felt a little bit like a cop-out. Weirdly, I would have been more okay if she was brainwashed or a clone, because that way the artificial queen at least would have been a character with agency, instead of a literal machine. In the grand scheme of things though, it's not a horrible plot point, and I don't think it really hurts the story. I just wish something a little more interesting was done with it. And yes, my headcanon is that Robo-Melia acts like a banned fanfiction version of Melia whose entire character revolves around boo-hoo, why won't Shulk love me? The real Melia is much deeper than that, people. Chapter 5. This chapter was the Australian roller coaster. First, joy upon realizing that not only was Vandam more important to this story than he was in 2, he had a daughter who is the leader of the rebel faction against Mobius, and who, I have to say, has the best fake Australian accent I have ever heard in any piece of media.
The name's Monica. Monica Vandam. The man who entrusted Ouroboros to you. I'm his daughter.
Daughter?
You know Guernica?
You're headed for the city, ain't ya?
How do you...
That's our base of operations. Come on.
What?
Shania, take point.
Yeah, right.
Major props to Pippa Bennett-Warner for this performance, because she's not Australian, and many people believe the Australian accent is one of the hardest accents to convincingly fake. It's not perfect, but as an Australian, I can say this is the closest I've heard a non-Australian pull off. But then, joy turned to sorrow, later in the chapter. And I'm gonna just show this cutscene and try and recreate my live reaction.
The hell you come here for?
What? Wait.
Gondor.
Wait, that's Gondor?
Is that Gondor?
I asked you a question.
What the hell is up with this accent?
Huh?
Huh? Cut the crap.
Is that supposed to be
Any
Australian?
voices there, you dead
Please tell me that's not supposed to
Hold
be
on.
Australian.
Is Gondor
Is Gondor a what?
Is Gondor what?
What? My name?
What name?
You got a problem
You got a problem with it?
So she's...
That is the worst Australian accent I've ever heard.
Thought she was being funny. Oh, redo you.
No, it wasn't. I didn't mean.
You want the accent to come and punch you in the face?
Go die in a ditch, you turd.
Yikes. Never thought I'd hear someone top Uni's sweary mouth.
Don't you go copying her, Senna.
No,
No,
don't.
not my
Never
style.
copy that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, she's the martial artist hero, isn't she?
I put all my love into that one for ya.
You know
better
those
appreciate
when
it.
Hollywood speaks Chinese, I cringe videos? This is that for me.
She's a pro. That's Monica's daughter for you.
Wait, no! No! No!
You mean that
I refuse to believe you're her!
That's about the size of it.
No, 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 there is no way the glorious Vandam line could produce an accent abomination like this. I refuse. I refuse. This is not real.
What's up now?
I looked up the voice actress who plays her, and she is apparently a BAFTA-winning actress, so something must have gone really horribly wrong with the voice direction. She might be not good at accents, or it could be a consequence of being told to do a bratty teenager voice and an Australian accent at the same time. But this is what I was mentioning before about there being one voice performance in this game that I don't like. It is Gondor. She is horrible. I want to mute the game every time she's on screen, which is a lot because she is annoyingly one of the most important heroes from Chapter 5 on, and is prominently featured in some of the final dungeon cutscenes. I will say that Senna's quest made me like Gondor a bit more, and her voice performance is better there for some reason. But overall, whenever you do another Xenoblade game, Monolith Soft, please get actual Australian voice actors for the Australian characters next time. But as a palate cleanser for all that, I still have to stress that the ending of Chapter 5 and the start of Chapter 6 are the best story moment I've seen in a video game. There's nothing more to be said, well, except one thing. This is gonna be a bit of a hot take, but I think N is just a better version of Jin. I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and its characters, but I was never a particularly huge fan of Jin. He just felt like a generic pretty boy villain with a sad backstory who you're supposed to feel bad for because his backstory is sad even though he kills a lot of people. Whereas N is an interesting mix of having both a tragic and understandable backstory, while also being a very fun love-to-hate villain, and it is incredibly satisfying watching him break down after he realizes M ruined his plans at the last moments. Also, N is the reason why I think Harry McEntire's performance is fantastic.
My feelings have never changed. They're the same as they've always been. They're for you, Mio. The time I had with you meant everything to me. But now, it's all gone. If she truly is gone, I'll have to redo it all. Watch me rewind our clocks back to the start. Noah, my long shadow, you have stolen her away from me. I will extinguish you and take her back. Mio is mine. She's not yours. She's mine. You are nothing. She belongs only to me.
I don't think I'd like Noah nearly as much as a character if N didn't exist. This is a rare case where I think the cliche two sides of the same coin really makes sense. And Noah would not be as interesting of a protagonist as he is if he weren't literally what one of the main villains could have become if they made better choices. Oh my beloved dense Rex, I hate you and your stupid voice and your stupid game that is to anime, blah 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 something Welsh. Chapter 6. This, for me, was where things started to run out of steam after how amazing the end of Chapter 5 was. I still count the beginning of 6 as part of 5. It's really just one area that feels padded out with Mio's Force Hero quest, which in my opinion is one of the weaker character quests because it feels more like an excuse for you to get Kamaravi's class. And then the way the chapter ends. So the good. I said before, but I really, really love D. He is my favourite Mobius, I guess besides N. Because he doesn't get a ton of screen time in the grand scheme of things, but every moment he's on screen does a perfect job of establishing him as supremely hateable. Especially these scenes in Chapter 6 where you find out who he was in his past life. I love that there is no dialogue in these flashbacks. You know exactly the kind of person he is without any need for words. But I don't like how Yoren died. It's just a bog standard villain redeems themselves by dying trope that I've seen many, many times before, and in fact, I've already seen it in 2 previous Xenoblade games. I was okay with it there, because those villains, it really felt like their arcs were ending, and that the sacrifice was the perfect conclusion to those arcs. With Yoren, what prompts his redemption is the party reminding him that he has value and to have confidence in himself. And him taking that advice to heart by essentially killing himself sends a very awkward message. I know very, very, very well, Trails of Cold Steel, how hard it is to write a sympathetic and believable villain redemption arc. It's why the redemption equals death trope is so common. But if there's anyone who could pull it off, it's Takahashi in Xenoblade. I feel like giving Yoren the bog standard redemption equals death treatment is a bit of a disservice to his potential. I'll say it right here, I think he should have become a hero. They could have given him the same not appearing in silhouette format that the post-game heroes got. But there's a second reason I don't like the way Yoren dies, and that's D. I said before that D had just established himself as supremely hateable. And I'm not typically a very violent person, but I was really rooting for the party, especially Uni, given how much he had tormented her over the course of the story, to brutally kill him. So Yoren sacrificing himself and taking D down with him not only felt like a waste of Yoren's potential, it also felt like kill stealing. But negativity aside, it did bring a smile to my face afterwards, seeing that even after thousands of years, Nia is very much still Nia. Chapter 7.
Mother dear!
When I said earlier that the game's final chapters feel simultaneously too slow-paced and too rushed, I mean it like this. I don't think I've ever gone into the final dungeon of any JRPG knowing this little about who the villains even are. So we fight N again, he gets literally Roxast or Shadow accepted into Noah. Part of me was rooting for N to be the final boss, but I think this is fine too. And we rescue Melia. I joked that the reason she got captured is because Jenna Coleman is too expensive. And she reveals...
About Zed. He is not a person.
Please don't say God, please don't say God, please don't say God!
But a concept.
Concept?
Everyone can feel uncertain. Frightened. These feelings coagulated, and then given a human form, or Zed.
A bit of background. While I was Let's Playing Persona 3, I was playing Persona 5. While I was Let's Playing Persona 4, I was playing Persona 5 Royal. As of recording this video, I am Let's Playing Persona 5. I was not playing a Persona game on my own time alongside it, so I thought the streak was broken. But it turns out it wasn't, because Xenoblade 3 was secretly a Persona game all along! I've seen Zed get a lot of mixed reception online, and I can see why some people think he's a flat villain. My view is, he could have been better, but I like him conceptually. The main problem I have is that unlike Persona, where people's cognition becoming reality is an established fact of the universe, the game doesn't really have enough time to explain exactly how or why a manifestation of the people's desire for stagnation became real in the context of Xenoblade's world. It might have something to do with the data stored in core crystals, but that's the best guess I've got. But I've always had a soft spot for stories where the real villain is humanity's own dark thoughts, rather than some external god who just wants to oppress humans because they love control and free will is bad. And I fully admit I'm biased because I've become sick to death of "but it was me, God" plots in JRPGs recently, so Zed gets points for me just by not being one. In fact, something I realized later is that Xenoblade 3's story has almost no religious symbolism or religiously coded factions, and that is refreshingly original for a JRPG. Also, I like this final boss fight mechanically a lot more than 2's, and maybe even 1's. There's a lot more variety to the phases, you get all the heroes coming in to help, you get the cutscenes of everybody in Ionios helping you take down Origin and Zed. It really feels like the entire world is fighting alongside you here, which fits perfectly with the themes of the story. And of course, Melia and Nia are the guest party members for the final phase of the final boss, which is something I guessed the moment I saw them in the first trailer. I found how Zed was defeated a little weird though. M and N's ghosts coming out of nowhere and just destroying themselves along with him didn't feel like it had a whole ton of foreshadowing. But overall, good final boss fights. And now the actual ending. I haven't seen a lot of opinions on this, but I do know that it's very controversial, and I can see why. When I first saw it, I didn't like that the world split apart. Not because any ships were ruined, but because it felt like it was just restoring the world to the previous status quo, which is exactly contrary to the themes of the game. But looking back on it, Ionios was always meant to be an unnatural, unstable fusion of the worlds, and hopefully the worlds will progress via Origin to a true unity in the future, which is alluded to via the post-credits scene. But now I have to give my obligatory comments on the photo. The first thing I'll say is I don't like how this has overshadowed everything else about the ending, because it has no impact on the plot of Xenoblade 3 and is just an Easter egg for fans of 2. But as a fan of 2, I had seen some people online talking about the "I love you and all you guys" meme getting a resurgence. So, you want to hear the reason why I wasn't too surprised by this photo? It's because that what I built up in my head was even more ridiculous. I thought that Nia had used Rex's DNA to restart her world, thereby making Rex the biological father of everyone in Agnes. But my opinion on what we actually got is, I am surprisingly okay with this. I think a lot of people online have got mad at this, claiming that it's like harem pandering, but Rex was never a self-insert, and there were already a lot of polyamory implications with the Rex-Pyra-Mithra triangle in the original game, and Nia was incorporated into that in the New Game Plus title screens. All three of the women involved are very comfortable with each other over the course of Xenoblade 2's plot, and I think it's just not in Rex's character to leave any of them out. It's something that may look ridiculous at first glance, but the more I think about it, the more I feel that it fits. Also, I smiled so much at that 5-second cameo of Poppy. I'm glad Nia at least has someone from her former life still around. Speaking of which, the implications that Mio might be or be a reincarnation of Nia and Rex's daughter. Thinking back, Mio has a subtler Welsh accent than Nia, and I can almost hear bits of Rex's accent and inflection in the way she talks, but I don't know if that was intentional. If it was though, it's brilliant. There's also the question of who Pyra and Mithra's children are, but I think that's just speculation and isn't relevant to anything in Xenoblade 3. So overall, there were a few stumbles towards the end, but I really liked Xenoblade 3's story. It's one of my favourite video game stories of all time, up there with the first two games. If you're having deja vu, that's because it's exactly what I said in the previous video. I decided to split this into two when the spoiler section ran on a little long. I hope you've enjoyed, and please share your thoughts on this game's story in the comments section. Here's a quick knee-jerk character tier list I made right after finishing the game. Note that at this point, I hadn't done any Ascension quests besides the party and Xeon.